cannabis craze is about to get even hotter thanks to a number of banks working to drive upcoming deals and IPOs in the space. Leslie Picker is back at headquarters to tell us who Wall Street's biggest pot dealers are and how they could shape up the cannabis market. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Melissa. Even though shareholders were giving back their gains from last week's pot stock surge, there's one group that still appears to be capitalizing on the cannabis industry: the drug dealers. No, not that kind of a drug dealer. I'm talking about the banks advising on all the deal making in the industry. About $500 million has been raised for cannabis companies through IPOs, while nearly $8 billion in M&A has been inked. And that has been a boon for Canadian banks. Yes, our neighbors to the north don't usually appear at the top of the so-called league tables ranking deal advisors. Those spots are typically occupied by large American firms like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. But when it comes to the cannabis industry, Canadian banks like Canaccord Genuity and BMO Capital Markets rank higher. While it's not illegal for U.S. firms to participate in these deals per se, the fact that pot is legal on a federal level in Canada makes it easier for their banks to participate. That's according to Harrison Phillips of Viridian, which advises the pot industry.
The rules as they stand today play in the favor of Canadian operators and institutions, investment banks included. So rather than for operators and investors trying to price the risk of federal illegality, they've moved to the capital markets that are more favorable to this space.
And don't expect this deal flow to slow down anytime soon. Aurora, a few days ago, spun off Australia's capital on the Canadian Securities Exchange. A hydroponic equipment specialist is planning an IPO next year. Denver-based M. Jardin, which cultivates and processes cannabis, is expected to go public in Canada through a reverse merger, Melissa.
All right, Leslie, thank you. Leslie Picker back at headquarters. So could this possible incoming flood of pot IPOs spread out from some of the money investors are pouring into these hot stocks, or is there more room to run here? And I guess the thinking before, Tim, was that there is something embedded in the valuation to the U.S. listed stocks,
right,
because they are U.S. listed versus Canadian listed, and it's just not within some charters to invest in Canadian stocks for institutional investors.
So you've opened that up to U.S. investors. You've obviously opened them up to the biggest trading exchanges. So if I was going to be looking at the sector now and what's the best way for investors to really approach it, I would look at three different things. I mean, first of all, right now I think there's major, let's call it deal disruption. So there's heavy, I would almost say, I wouldn't say it's fatigue, but I know of 25 to 30 deals coming in the next month or so, and I think this is something that will continue to be an issue for investors. I think yesterday's price action is not tomorrow's price action. You've had a major move in the sector, and investors that think that they're all going to go up. Look, the dedicated guys are rotating out of some into others, and there's dedicated money and there's crossover money. I think we spend more time seeing what the crossover money does to the U.S. market. Second, stock technicals. Again, it's very important to understand, folks, what are you investing in? What's the size of the issue? Where is it trading? Is it trading in Canada? Is it trading here? So we talked about that dynamic. A lot of these stocks also eventually trade in the pink sheets, which is the over-the-counter market, and that's very important. I would warn investors that those markets are less transparent, there's less volume there, and I think there's potentially more volatility, even though the pink sheets for a lot of these Canadian names have been a very robust place to play. And finally, look, just the fundamentals for these names. Understand, has this company been in business before? Are they making money? Did they suddenly slap a cannabis tag on their name and suddenly get a different valuation? Alignment.
Like a blockchain kind of.
Well, yeah. So I would just say anytime there's a hot sector and there are companies, and I've seen this in the biopharma space in the last couple of weeks, a lot of companies that really could make an argument they soon will be in cannabis, and I'm not saying these companies have done that, but I've watched $2, $3, $5 billion companies have big rocket ships in the last 2 weeks. I think you have to be very careful. So finally, I don't know if we still have these charts that we talked about looking at the entire sector, but if you look at the sector, the bottom line is it's had a major run. So if you look at a global cannabis index, the index I brought together today is by NCV. Alan up there, those guys do a lot of work. This is a global index. You can see basically since that Constellation deal, the entire sector is up over 40%. So for investors that think it's going to be the same move over the next 3 to 4 months, I think you have to be very careful. Again, what makes up an index? That's changing every single day. And the good news for folks is that you're getting a little bit more of a peripheral, wider. It's not just production, but it's the brands, it's the packaging, it's the other parts of the sector that are very exciting.
Do you think that this onslaught of new IPOs will how many of them will get done? Is there enough demand there for all of them to get done?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they will all get done, or I think most of them will get done, especially if it's a real company that has real financials. A lot of these companies have been waiting for this moment. I think the question is, at what price will they get the valuation, or will the aftermarket do what it did in some of these names?
I think the marketplace has a lot of room to grow here, and it has a lot of room for all the players to be successful. You have a lot of beverage companies that still need to be disrupted or find counterparts. You have the cosmetic industry that still needs to find some counterparts. I'm still long Canopy. I'm still long Kronos. I think Tilray, after that big move up and down, is probably a buy again.
Right, Doug?
GW Pharma, I think we did a power pitch for that sucker a year or so ago. Why are you making a face?
Because just 15 minutes ago we told you it was fast pitch and not power pitch.
It was power pitch
And
then,
just
no, I think. It was so long ago. That's what we call it. That's probably gotten a little ahead of itself, but if you look, Morgan Stanley just, I think, resumed coverage, $191 price target, as did Stifel. This group is going to go up. GW Pharma, by the way, is a name. Slow and steady wins the race. So if you want to be in the name without that much beta, this is the one, I think.
All right, still ahead. It is the new face of media. The market getting a makeover today as Facebook and Netflix enter the communication sector. We'll tell you what it means for your portfolio. Plus, check out this stock heading its lowest level in nearly a decade today, down more than 50% from its 52-week high. Can you guess what it is? The answer when Fast Money returns.